Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. We're going to give it 2 seconds for a few people to come in, and then we'll get going. Okay, I think in the interest of time, we can get going. Welcome everyone to this latest webinar in the series of webinars leading up to our global event happening later this year in October. My name is Roy Boa. I am from the African Climate Action Secretariat based at South North in South Africa. We are the African Regional Partnership under GCAP, and I'm happy to be moderating this session today. Before we get into the webinar, I'm going to hand over to Sophie, who's going to do a few housekeeping announcements.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'll make this super brief, just a few things to cover before we dive into the content of today's webinar. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. The purpose of that is so that we can share the recording with all attendees and registrants following the session. All participants will be muted upon joining and throughout the webinar. However, you are strongly encouraged to make use of the chat feature as well as the Q&A function. Please use the chat to add comments and share inputs, and use the Q&A function to ask questions, which we will cover during the Q&A at the end of today's session. If you encounter any technical difficulties, please reach out to myself, Sophie Schrader, or my colleague, Holly Darrow, and we'll do our best to assist you. You can also adjust your audio through audio settings, and you're welcome to dial in if your computer audio is having any issues. You're also encouraged to turn on the live closed captions feature so that you can tune in your preferred language. And lastly, as you leave today's session, a survey will launch, and we really do review all of this feedback to make future sessions even better. So please do consider filling out the survey and providing your honest feedback. Thanks. Back to you, Roy.
Thank you, Sophie. So I see everyone has been adding their names into the chat and saying hello. Please feel free to do that. It's great to see everyone here. To give you a quick update of today's agenda, we'll go into a brief overviews of GCAP as well as the Clean Energy Solution Center. We'll then be moving on to a short intervention from Nigeria. So we've had a quick swap around on our agenda. So I just want to quickly send apologies. Initially, we were going to have a presentation from Benan Yassin from Malawi. Unfortunately, due to a last-minute emergency, he's unable to attend. But luckily, by popular demand, we have Chioma, who is returning, and will be sharing some of the progress from Nigeria's side, and then we will be hearing from Sanjali from the UNDP. So with that being said, I'm going to hand over to Tim, who will do an overview of GCAP for us.
Super. Thanks so much, Roy. And I will try and keep this brief, as I suspect many of you are already somewhat familiar with GCAP, given that you're on a GCAP distribution list and joining us here today. But GCAP, for those who may not be familiar, serves as a global platform and network to facilitate and support peer exchange, peer collaboration, and dialogue with the overarching goal of accelerating ambitious climate action, both at the national, regional, and global level. GCAP's a little over a decade old, was launched in 2011, then as the LEDS Global Partnership. Some of you may know us from our former name, transitioned to the name GCAP just a couple of years ago. We represent folks from over 4,500 different folks from around the world, representing folks from government ministries, planning agencies, those working in the private sector on project implementation and development, those from investors, as well as the donor community. So really aim to have a pretty diverse, broad, and inclusive network of members here. One of the main marquee features of GCAP is that we really are sort of a member-owned, member-driven, and demand-driven network. And what I mean by that is that you all here on this webinar today really are sort of the core and the heart and soul of everything that GCAP aims to do. For example, when we deliver technical assistance requests, when we offer training, that sort of thing, we really are drawing from the network of peer champions and climate experts that we have within the network, rather than necessarily pulling from consultants. So really happy to have all of you here today, representing sort of the core of GCAP. Go to the next slide. So what do we mean when we say ambitious climate action? There's quite a lot that falls in that space, but we really aim to find and replicate successful actions and tangible actions in the climate space across 5 main overarching goals. So it starts with working with members, working with countries on developing ambitious NDCs and LTS to help kind of develop that vision and make sure that we have the strong and ambitious guiding vision for what a real climate transformation at the national, regional, and global level could look like. Following that, working really to build up the institutional enabling environment, ensuring there are strong policies and regulations to actually allow implementation of these ambitious NDCs and LTS. Moving forward, really working to ensure that we're helping develop strong project pipelines of bankable climate projects that can be replicated and serve as pilots. And then moving on, really working to ensure that we're working across our network of partners to mobilize investment into these projects, both for pilots and then ultimately for scale up and replication. And then finally, number 5 over there, making sure that we're working to draw lessons learned. What are some of the successes? What have been successful approaches? How can we learn from those approaches that maybe haven't been quite as successful, to help inform the next round of updates and implementation and this sort of feedback cycle. So these are the main goals across which GCAP really aims to work. So what does this look like and how do we implement our work? Well, there's a global steering committee, which is where I sit out here in Colorado in the USA. We have steering committee members representing across the globe and really aiming to work across four core thematic areas, so looking at energy, transportation, the entire agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector, which is huge across many of our regional platforms. And then, of course, kind of underpinning all of this is that finance piece, making sure that we're working with partners to mobilize investment. Our regional platforms, there are 3, one in Africa, which of course is where Roy sits. And then we also have the Asia-LEDS partnership and LEDS-LAC operating in Latin America and the Caribbean. And each of these regional platforms aims to bring together practitioners within the region to focus on specific thematic and topical areas that are of critical interest and import to each region. I won't go through the specific topics in detail, but you can see them there for each of the various regions on the right side, kind of those regionally driven, regionally owned topical priorities. And then how GCAP and the regional platforms really implement a lot of their work. There's several different avenues. So a lot of the regional platforms will have high ambition leadership groups that are really there to help kind of put forward a vision for what would sort of cohesive and coherent regional action on some of these topics look like. There are communities of practice, which bring together these practitioners more at the working level, again, from ministries, from developers, project implementers, and so forth, to really address what are some of the key barriers and challenges and provide a platform for training, knowledge sharing, direct technical assistance to overcome some of those. And then, of course, there's also direct bilateral technical assistance available through our Climate Action Accelerator. So the regional platforms here really are where a lot of the core work is implemented. So I will stop there with that very brief overview of GCAP, so that we can get into the real meat of why everybody's here. Thanks all.
Thanks, Tim. And now I'll hand over to Aaron, who will give a quick overview of the Clean Energy Solution Center. Over to you, Aaron.
Thanks, Roy, and Thanks, everyone. Really excited to have you all on today's webinar. I'm Aaron Ng with the U.S. Department of Energy, and I cover both GCAP and the Clean Energy Ministerial, but I'll focus today on the Clean Energy Ministerial and the Clean Energy Solution Center. Again, I'll also try to keep this introduction brief so we can get to our very interesting presentations today. But as we mentioned, today's webinar is brought to you in part by the Clean Energy Solutions Center. And the Clean Energy Solutions Center itself is an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is a collaboration of 29 countries to rapidly increase the deployment of clean energy technologies globally. The Solution Center is led by the governments of Australia and the United States, and it is operated by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which, as Tim noted, supports both GCAP and the Solution Center. The whole idea of the Clean Energy Solution Center is to support developing governments with the capacity to design and adopt policies and programs to deploy clean energy technologies. Next slide. We do that in three ways. The first is through our Ask an Expert service. This service is available to any government that needs additional capacity to support a clean energy question or policy issue, and it is available free of charge to developing countries. All you need to do is go to our website and apply to get that question answered. In the history of the Clean Energy Solutions Center, we've answered over 300 requests, and we hope to answer yours. Another way that we support governments is through training and capacity building. We've done over 300 webinars like the one that we're hosting today, which are also available on our site as a resource for clean energy solutions around the world. And finally, our resource library not only includes our past webinars, but other reports, policy briefs, journal articles, etc., to help support the rapid deployment of clean energy technologies globally. Given that governments will be working on their NDCs and looking to implement them in years to come, I am glad we can share best practices and lessons learned on webinars like today's. And if you find today's webinar helpful, I would encourage you to leverage the resources mentioned, such as reaching out to GCAP to support your climate ambitions through its regional platforms, communities of practice, and tailored technical assistance, as well as the Clean Energy Ministerial's Clean Energy Solutions Center's Ask an Expert service to answer your clean energy questions. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and I hope to see you all at future webinars. Now back to Roy.
Thank you, Aaron. So with that, our introductions are done, and we'll be moving along into the meat of today's webinar. So the topic of today's webinar is implementing NDCs. One of the key areas that a lot of countries are grappling with at the moment is how their NDCs and LTS work together cohesively. And one of the main thinkings coming out is that our long-term strategies need to be our overall visioning, and NDCs should be steps towards achieving these. So we really think that, NDCs need to become more concrete documents towards implementation for countries. So with that being said, we're going to get some reflections from Nigeria, where we have Chioma Amundi, who is the desk officer for the NDCs and LTS at the National Council for Climate Change in Nigeria. Over to you, Chioma. Chioma, we see your screen, but you're still on mute. There we go.
Hello, Roy. Thank you for letting me to be at this webinar today. I am struggling to set up my presentation. Just give me a few seconds.
No problem. And once again, thank you so much to Chioma, who's managed to step in last minute in place of Benon Yassin from Malawi, who unfortunately had an emergency and couldn't join today. So we're very grateful for your time today, Chioma.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
You can?
Yes, we can.
Okay, but I can't see it here from my own side, so I don't know if it is my network. I can only see your face.
We see your screen. Yeah. All right. Look at the top of your Zoom browser. There should be two tabs, one for webinar and one for Amundi Chioma's screen. Can you see that?
Moody Choma screen. That's what I'm doing, but previously I saw it, but I can't find it now. I can't see my screen from here. Okay, can you see it? Can you see it still?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Can you see it again?
Yes, we still see it. Yeah, we see it.
Okay, so thank you very much. My presentation is aligning the NDCs with the long-term emission development strategies. As you all know, Nigeria has submitted their long-term this year, and this presentation will be centered on how the critical steps to align the nationally determined contribution with the long-term emission development strategies. So as you know, this alignment is very essential to achieve the ambitious goals that were set forth in the Paris Agreement and also to tackle the issues of climate change. So this is the content of my presentation where I will be speaking on all the topics aligned here. So basically, introduction, as you know, that the global community objective about the Paris Agreement is to make sure that the global temperature is well reduced, preferable to 1.5 degrees Celsius before pre-industrial level. And again, to achieve this very goal, countries have submitted their NDCs, which is not sufficient. And the global community has actually urged countries to also submit their long-term low emission development strategies, which is gearing towards net zero by 2050. Aligning these very important plans is very crucial for the ensuring that the long and the short-term actions contribute to the long-term climate goals. So the first steps in is to establish a coordinated institutional framework. So to do that, there's a successful approach that you need to take, which requires coordinated effort across all stakeholders. Establish a multi-sectoral task force within your nations on how to implement and these long-term low emission development strategies and also the NDCs. So nobody is going to be left behind. This involves the government, this will involve the private sector, the civil society to drive the climate strategies, the CSOs, and also the NGOs. So there's also need to define roles and responsibilities, which is stressing the importance of clear duties among the stakeholders coming from the federal level to the subnational government, and also ensuring political commitment. Like Nigeria, we have also socialized the LTS with the parliamentarians, where we have highlighted the roles and responsibilities of the parliamentarians. We also identified and also showcased the roles of ministers in actualization of the long-term low emission development strategies and also the NDCs. So the next step that Nigeria has identified as very crucial is integrated policy and planning processes. How do we harmonize the timeline between the NDC and the LTLEs? You know, the NDC is short times while the LTLEs are long times. So we need to harmonize the timelines and also set targets that speak to each other. So policy coherent, call for ensuring that climate policies across different sectors and levels of government are consistent and mutual reinforcing. So what this implies is that what we intend to do is that we are going to mainstream the mitigation options of the LTLEs, which is also embedded in the NDC, and we're going to also enhance what we have incorporated in the long-term emission development strategy in the NDC 3.0 that Nigeria has started now to develop. So we are going to put this out in the subnational government to make sure that their action plan is reflective of the global community that Nigeria has actually submitted. So mainstreaming climate action, we have already started with Lagos State, and we have also done with several other states we are still in the very early stage of making sure there's mainstream climate action, the target of the NDC into their development agenda, basically that will trickle down from the subnational government to the community, which is the local government. So enhancing data collection and management, what we have done and identified as a way is that we are developing a robust data system through the support that we have received from the EU. We are establishing an institutional MRV system, which is very holistic, and we're working with Nigeria's Bureau of Statistics, which is saddled with the responsibility of collating and archiving data in Nigeria to make sure that we have a robust data system that is dependable and accountable. So basically what we are doing is that we are developing a spelled out template that speaks to the needs of the NDC and the LTS. And we're also handing this particular template to the Bureau of Statistics so that they can be informed, and when they're collating data, it will be reflective of what we need as an institution. So we're also trying to also promote conducting assessment, regular assessment. The emphasis is the need for public evaluation to measure progress and also adjust strategies. And this we have started by, we have kickstarted the national stock take exercise, and we are at the verge of conducting stakeholder engagement to see how we have done since we submitted the NDC in 2015. So that objective is just for have a rapid assessment of what we have done in terms of the conditional and also the unconditional target of the NDC, and this will also inform the progress of the LTLEDs. And also this will also set the first step for Nigeria's transparency reporting system. So fostering data sharing and collaboration, this is also what we have done. We have started engagement with all the relevant institutions, MDAs, private sector, who has the sole responsibility of archiving or also communicating what they have done in different fields to the National Council on Climate Change. And we have kickstarted this by having a registry within the website of Federal Ministry of Environment, where we have housed from 2015, all projects and programs that has climate reasoning in it and have also had the potential of reduction of emissions. So we intend to also promote the stakeholder engagement and capacity building. Inclusive stakeholder engagement is very key, and this can never be overemphasized. Ensure that all relevant groups, including the marginalized communities, involved in climate action planning. So how we're going to achieve this is that we are developing a very tailored down awareness campaigns that is focused on languages, religious background information. And when Nigeria has 6 political zones, and we're finding what will be a tool that will be addressing communication in different geopolitical zones of Nigeria. So we also having a capacity building program, which we also trying to integrate in the NDC 3.0, and having a spelled out elements or strategies on how to promote capacity building program, focusing on enhancing the skills and knowledge of stakeholders to participate and contribute to climate strategies. Public awareness is very key, and we have identified it as a way and means of making sure that the NDC and the LTS is aligned. So ensuring financial alignment and mobilization, we also aligning budget processes. As I said earlier, we have educated the parliamentarians and we have suggested to them that whichever project and programs under the national appropriation that comes to their table for approval from 2024 going forward must have climate reasoning in it, which means that Nigeria is advocating for greening of the national budget. So mobilization of finance has also been discussed, and the finance is not only tailored towards the NDCs, but also the long-term emission development strategies. Discussion importance of securing jobs from public, private, and international sources to support this both initiatives. So innovation financial mechanism is one of the ways of aligning the NDCs and LTS. So highlighting the need for creative financial solutions such as green bonds. As you know, Nigeria has issued the first national green bonds. They have issued the second one and the preparation of issuing the third one. And that green bond is only tailored towards assisting Nigeria to meet the unconditional target of the NDC. The first issuance was tailored towards issues of energy, but the second issuance was cut across all the sectors of the NDC, which is the energy sector, the industry sector, the oil and gas sector, the transportation sector, and also the waste sector and water sector. So the third issuance is going to be larger than the second issuance, and is going to address all the sectors as well. So this is what Nigeria has done to make sure that they meet the part of the bargain on the NDC that we have communicated to the global community. So the other step is fostering international cooperations and knowledge exchanges, participating in global initiatives. Well, we have seen the results of this global stock take, and we're putting it into consideration while preparing to update Nigeria's NDC 3.0. So one of the emphasis is tripling renewable energy, which is very timely for Nigeria, both for our energy needs and also both the agenda of the present administration. So we have conducted how to harmonize the partners coordination call that we did for focusing only on the NDC, to expand it to focus also on the long-term low emission development strategies, and see how the finance that is being provided can be tailored towards long-term issues, not only addressing the short-term issues. So we also noted that learning from other countries are very key on how to actualize this very important initiative that the Paris Agreement has put on board for global emission reduction goals. So developing a legal and regulatory framework, we talked about the climate legislation call for enhancing laws that mandate reduction and climate resilient measures across private sectors in Nigeria. So we've started by developing what they call the banking principles, sustainable banking principles, and we have shared this with the Central Bank of Nigeria and awaiting their validation. And this piece of document will not only show the private sector on actions and activities on how to reduce emission, but also we've also facilitate a means of how to mobilize finance to achieve our objectives. So the emphasis on the importance of setting targets and guidelines for emission, energy efficiency, and other related areas has also been put as a strategy on how Nigeria is going to align the NDCs and the long-term emission development strategy. Like I said before, monitoring and compliance mechanism is very key, and this has been addressed with the institutional framework that we are trying to operationalize now, that the EU has supported. So we have also done a sectoral MRV system, and we were supported by the EU and also the ICAT, where they focused on the issues of energy sector MRV and also transport, waste, and industry. But we are going to also expand the sectoral aspect of the MRV system to cover other sectors of the long-term low emission development strategies, and also the new elements that we're going to be putting out in the new NDC 3.0, as we already started the process of revising that NDC. So the next step for me, for Nigeria, is integrating the climate risk and resilience consideration. We'll do the risk and assessment, which we did in the NDC 2.0. But what we did, we had 36 states in Nigeria, and FCT making it 37 states. But because of the paucity of fund we had when we're developing the Nigeria's NDC 2.0, we only did the risk assessment and vulnerability assessment for only 2 states. But we tend now, with the submitted LTS, we tend to expand the scope to do the risk assessment, and also to find out how that will be informed in our new strategies and actions on how to actualize what the 2 targets that we have set for ourselves. So adaptation strategy is very key, in as much as we are very paramount in doing mitigation actions, but we cannot overly emphasize on the needs of adaptation. We stress development of the strategies to adapt to the impact of climate change, particularly to vulnerable sectors and communities. So resilient indicators are very key if you want to achieve these two objectives. So we have expanded the scope in Nigeria's long-term low emission development because we looked at 4 scenarios. So those scenarios are cut across the renewable energy scenario, and we also talked about the gas scenarios, and several other policies were considered, the energy transition plan and all that. And we cannot be able to achieve that objective that we have set both in the NDC and the LTS without considering what technology innovations and transfer that is needed. So this particular technology needs assessment. We have been working with the Federal Ministry of Science and Technology to find out what are the suitable technologies that will be relevant in all the targets that we have set in terms of strategies and plans of the long-term emission development strategies, and also the new ones we are considering in the NDC 3.0. So they are working with us to make sure that we identify not only the international best practices, international best technologies, but also the one that has the local content that will be able to address our needs. So aligning the subnational and local action can never go out of needs. What we communicated to the global community cannot be achieved if it is not, if we not take it down to subnational government. The 36 states of the Federation of Nigeria is very key to achieving climate goals. So what we are doing now is to make sure there's local climate plans that is tailored to have a lot of co-benefits across all their needs. The present administration has declared emergency in food sector, and because of this, we are looking at how to enhance activities in issues of agriculture, forestry, and also we are taking this to the subnational government where concrete actions will be taken, not only the subnational government, but also the local actors, the communities. So we intend to also build their capacities in the emerging technologies to be able to foster and strengthen the ability of local government to implement and sustain climate actions. And we're also stressing the importance of involving local communities in planning and implementation of climate strategies. We have demonstrated this by bringing all the local government representatives to a capacity building training where we have socialized the NDCs with them and also the LT-led. But we're also trying to also expand this engagement to make sure that the right people are also in the room and their capacities are well built. So strengthening international climate diplomacy, engaging in the UNFCCC has been a very big strategy on how Nigeria is going to achieve both objectives. So we participate actively in all the negotiations, and also we are also working with the Sharm el-Sheikh mitigation work program, which is informing the mitigation options that we have for Nigeria, both in the NDC 3.0 and also the LT-led. So regional cooperation is very key. We encourage that every country will also have that regional cooperation with neighboring countries to address shared climate challenges. So global climate networks is also very important. Highlight the benefit of being of the global network for knowledge sharing and coordinated actions, which we are doing today in this webinar today, so which is very key. So conducting a scenario planning and modeling. So long-term scenarios, which we have identified in our LT-led, stress the importance of developing and analyzing the long-term scenario to guide policy and decision makers. So what we did first before we submitted the long-term emission development strategy of Nigeria is that we had the first national socialization workshop and validation where the national stakeholders spoke on the needs and what they need to see in the plan. Then after the validation and after the launching, we socialize this plan to the parliamentarians, like I said before, and they also understood their roles and responsibility to make sure that Nigeria also achieve what they have communicated in the strategy. So we talked about the stakeholder workshops, encouraging coordinating workshops with stakeholders to explore and refine climate scenarios and strategies. So enhanced transparency and accountability can never be overemphasized. Look at the new Nigeria is trying to also communicate their BTR by end of November this year. So we're incorporating the needs of the BTR, both in the long term and also the NDC 3.0. So we also depend also on individual reviews by the academia. We have a group of professors who also looked at what where the gaps are, the challenges, and inform the government on way forward. So public participation is very key when it comes to meeting both the NDC and the LTS. So we have also trying to showcase what are the co-benefits. Highlighting the economic co-benefits is also one of the strategies that we have put out there, so that it will be like an attraction for both the governors and the subnational government, the decision makers. We also did a green job assessment when we reviewed Nigeria's NDC 2.0 in 2021. So we highlighted climate actions can create economic opportunities, which we have also demonstrated by presenting and creating an enabling environment that will facilitate this achievement. So we also intend to also do the social benefit, discuss the potential for improving public health, and we're working with Ministry of Health now to integrate the health sector in the new NDC 3.0. So environmental core benefits has also been an additional environmental benefits and enhanced biodiversity ecosystem from climate actions. So in conclusion, these are the steps that we have found very interesting to align both the short time of the NDC and the long-term goal of the LTS. And important, this Paris Agreement can never be achieved if these two very good initiatives is not aligned. So thank you very much for listening, and over to you, Ron.
Thank you so much, Chioma. It's amazing to see everything that's being done and all the progress being made. So congratulations to you and the NCC for your progress in this regard. But now that we've heard a country experience of how countries can go about aligning and setting implementation paths for their climate ambitions, we're going to move on to some support that countries can access. So I'm going to hand over to Sanji Lee, who's going to present on the UNDP's climate promise. Over to you,
Great.
Sanji.
Great, thanks, Rory. Thanks, Rory, and for inviting us to this presentation. It's really great to hear from the country perspective, but I think in my session, I'm going to take a step back and try to give a bit of the global overview of what countries are doing as part of their NDC revision, and also the implementation by sharing some of our climate promise work. Next slide, please. For those who are not familiar with the UNDP's climate promise, this is UNDP's global flagship initiative that kicked off in 2019, and it is now the world's largest offer of support on NDCs. So we have provided support to more than 127 countries, which represents over 85% of the developing countries. We are not just providing NDC revision support, we do also provide the ongoing support related to the implementation. So more than 96 countries are receiving this implementation support. And recently, as we are engaging with the NDC Partnership Thematic Call, we are supporting over 37 countries specifically on the long-term strategies as well, meaning the development, but also their alignment with their NDCs. Next slide. Building on all this infrastructure of the climate promise, recently we have launched a new phase of the UNDP's Climate Promise 2025. And this is, as I mentioned, to really respond to the urgent needs to ramp up and enhance the climate ambitions for the Paris Agreement, and as countries are required to revise and put forward their new NDCs ahead of 2025 cycle. So the Secretary General has actually asked the UNDP to be the organization to organize and coordinate all the UN response on NDC support. So many of you are familiar with the emails or the coordination calls you may have already undertaken at the country level. So we're trying to start this process already, trying to understand where the demands are and how best we can match those demands. Just to share a little bit of the results that we have achieved from the first phase of the climate promise on the NDC revision. If you look at all these 127 countries that have enhanced their NDCs, 91% have raised their mitigation ambition, and they all reference the energy, of course, acknowledging the critical importance of the energy for the transition. And 93% has also enhanced their ambition revision, and we're also providing support on the national adaptation plan as well. The social elements were also pretty important in the whole revision process. 95% of the NDCs that we supported included the gender equality and referenced youth, and many are also referring more and more of the importance of local communities and indigenous people. And in general, we're seeing that the countries that we've supported for the NDC 2.0 had a higher quality with better data, detailed costings, and they're very much linked to the development and other sectoral policies and planning. So we wanted to leverage the success of the first phase of the climate promise and supporting this climate promise 2025 and for the NDC 3.0. Next slide. I know we wanted to talk a lot about the ambition for this session, so I wanted to also share some of the support that we have provided on the implementation. And we, of course, believe that the NDC enhancement and ambition raising is really intertwined. And yeah, the quality of the NDCs and the process the countries have taken in designing their NDC really matters for making those NDCs investable and implementable. Our implementation support, as I mentioned, is ongoing, starting from 2020 and of course, going all the way to 2026. And what does it mean? We do support many countries. For example, 52 countries were supported on developing their implementation roadmaps, where they outline specific milestones to achieve their NDC targets, understanding different roles and responsibilities and capacities within their ministries. And many countries are also trying to link this with their other development plans and sectoral strategies as part of their implementation. And as we can all expect, a huge portion of the implementation work is always around the financing work, mobilizing the needed resources for turning their pledges into action. So we have supported almost more than 100 countries in developing the financing instruments, understanding their budgets, aligning their climate change with their development strategies, budgeting, and spending. And many countries are developing their NDC financing strategies and investment plan as well. Together with that, we're also trying to share some knowledges within these countries to capture some of those earlier experiences and lessons as well. Next slide. Now let me share some of the results that we are seeing in terms of the implementation work, because I thought that could also give some insights on where the challenges on where could be the potential opportunities and lessons learned. Many countries, as part of their implementation, they're strengthening and establishing some of the policies, institutions, and capacities that is needed for the NDC implementation. Of course, you need the right capacity in all ministries, not just in the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Finance and Planning, to make sure that the climate change is really at the heart of the government's fiscal planning and budgeting processes. So we provided those capacity building support, but also helping to build these climate policies and legislations, which has been proven to be very effective. And I think that's also something that Choma has mentioned in her presentation as well. Many countries are actually enacting the climate change law that is putting some legal backing and groundwork for really putting those and turning those pledges into actions. Many countries are engaged with the resource mobilization efforts, the NDC and the climate finance work. As I mentioned, 56 countries were supported on developing their financing strategies. Many countries, before they develop the financing strategy, they start with the thorough assessment of understanding the cost of their NDCs, how much it will cost to really implement those NDC measures, and understand the gaps, what the government already has as part of their public budget and how much has to be further mobilized. So the assessment is actually key first step to really inform and provide the evidence for those financing strategies. Many countries are also involved in a lot of innovative financing tools, and then they are also using some tools like the green bonds, carbon pricing, the carbon tax, and many countries also engage with the carbon markets, and UNDP has been providing support on that as well. Last but not least, of course, the private sector is key. All these funds, the finance cannot be just bared by the public finance. So we are working very actively and closely with the private sectors, and countries are working very closely with their private sectors to better align their business practices for the goals of the Paris Agreement. Next slide. Another research, it's really about the monitoring and the reporting. In order for those climate measures to be actionable, it is very important for government to put in place those monitoring and validation systems in the country. So we have an entire transparency team that is supporting countries in designing and updating their MRV system. And we've been providing those regular capacity building supports at the regional and country levels. Last but not least, I think Choma has also mentioned, it is important to make sure that the NDC becomes an investment strategy and investment plan for the entire country, the entire government, meaning that this is not just the responsibility of the Ministry of Environment, but it is also the Ministry of the Planning and also other ministry, whether that's the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Energy. So many countries are actually trying to align their NDC priorities with other development plans and other sectoral policies to really looking at those synergies and co-benefits of those climate actions and how they can contribute to the SDGs. So many countries are doing the macroeconomic modeling that usually helps to understand the synergies and trade-offs, and they're trying to mainstream these NDC targets into other sectoral policies. Next slide. This is just not a comprehensive list of all the work that the countries are doing, but just a snapshot of different country examples under each work areas that we are supporting. So as you can see, the UNDP support is mainly on these three pillars: the scale and speed, and then applying ambition and lasting inclusivity. So if you look at the scale and speed, this is the part that we're supporting in helping countries to enhance their ambition. So you'll see many countries are engaged with the carbon markets as a way to mobilize resources. We've supported the carbon market frameworks in Uganda and Kenya. Countries are also engaged with a particular tools like circular economies tools to better understand their waste sector intervention. And we are helping with the climate finance and mobilization by setting up the systems in many countries like Peru, Tunisia, Armenia, and so on. And as I mentioned, the support is also provided on the adaptation work and the development of the national adaptation strategies and plans. In terms of amplifying ambitions, this is the part where we are supporting the NDC revision and the LTS development and implementation. So you'll see that, of course, through the Climate Promise support, we've been supporting many countries in raising their mitigation and ambitions. And as I mentioned recently, we are engaged with 37 countries in developing their LTS. And that, of course, involves not just the full-fledged long-term strategies, but starting with the vision setting, understanding what are the possible different pathways to understand what are the capacity gaps in the countries. So we are engaged with a pretty varied areas of work in providing support on that front. Last but not least is the inclusivity part. We need to make sure that these NDCs, LTS, these climate strategies are owned by the entire society. And this is important to make sure that the NDCs are implementable, right? Everyone has to own this process and be part of this process. So we are engaging with different youth, gender, and indigenous peoples and local communities to make sure that they have the meaningful participation in these all processes and provide a relevant capacity building support so they can really be the agents of change in the government's climate actions. Next slide, please. Recently, as we are asked to provide support and coordinate all the UN support on NDC revision, we have some survey internally to understand what is the country's NDC revision for 2025 for the NDC 3.0. But I think this really shows what are the challenges that countries have faced in turning their NDCs into implementation. And that is why probably in the next round of the NDCs, they really want to focus on these dimensions so that they can really scale up the implementability of their NDCs. As you can imagine, the access to finance is always the biggest hurdles many countries have expressed. 33% of the respondents have said that that is the major challenge, and that is, of course, why they wanted to further highlight these dimensions in their new NDCs. The second biggest challenge identified was the political will. There's often some political changes in the countries, whether that's an election, and given also the 5-year time frame of the NDCs, unfortunately, NDCs are heavily affected by those political dynamics and the changes in the political commitments and the leadership. So many countries are now looking into how better make sure those political commitments are not just short-term commitments, but can be the lasting impacts. And that's why some countries are putting legislations and putting a climate change bill to make sure that this political will is more long-term. There are some other barriers that has been identified, the linkage with the broader SDGs, making sure that it does contribute the jobs creations, the economy, the well-being of the society. And that is also why many countries are intending to strengthen the linkages between the SDGs and the NDCs. Gender and youth, those are other considerations that countries have expressed the need to further strengthen in their next cycle of the NDCs. Next slide. We learned that finance is always the biggest bottleneck for the climate action. So I just wanted to share a bit of the overview of the support that we're providing on supporting the resource mobilizations and mobilizing climate finance. So as I mentioned, many countries are starting with the development of the very broad financing strategies and investment plan as a next step of the NDC development. And then as part of those processes, they are creating the bankable projects, the pipeline development, and then they do engage with a lot of the concept notes development so that they could be part of those other long-term opportunities for climate finance, whether from the GEF or the GCAP. So they're engaged with this exercise. And the innovative financing instruments, as I mentioned, whether that's the green bonds or the debt for nature swaps, it's also another dimensions that countries are engaged with, and the carbon markets, as I mentioned. The climate budgeting is also very important that the government can do at their national level to really making sure that the resources are well allocated for those green activities. And the private sector engagement activities are also pretty prominently featured in the requests that we're seeing. Next slide. So this is the final slide of my presentation. I just wanted to wrap up with some of the lessons learned. I did not want to pinpoint a country example because I think it's better to hear directly from them, as we have from the case of Nigeria. It was really great to hear from Choma. But at the global level, with our support from the Climate Promise supporting 127 countries, these are some of the common areas, common lessons that we have extracted. The political leadership and the societal buy-in is very important, and this is more and more important. As you can see, we're talking more and more about the just transition, making sure that this green transition is also contributing to the well-being of the people and not leaving anyone behind. So that process of bringing everyone on board in the design and implementation of the NDC is very critical. And then the second part is the policy integration. I think this is the part that Choma has already touched upon, that climate action should not be just a set-alone document of the Ministry of Environment. It has to be integrated into other national development and planning and sectoral policies and have to be owned by the whole of government in order to make sure that they become an investable strategy. Sorry. The third part is the robust legal and institutional framework, making sure that there are some enabling environments to make sure those plans are actually actionable. So I've talked about the climate change legislations, but also some government level coordination bodies and institutional setups to really carry out on the constant revision and understanding of the NDCs, understanding that this is an iterative process. Last one is capacity building, making sure that all ministries and the whole societies understand what this NDC means for them. And the evidence is also key. I think Choma mentioned to understand the synergies and trade-offs between the NDCs and broader national development concerns. And many developing countries also highlighted the importance of the international support, given the common but differentiated responsibility. And this is also becoming more and more major topic as part of the UNFCCC processes. I see Roy on the video, meaning that probably I ran out of time. So I'm going to stop there. The last slide I have, maybe if we can just quickly show, is some of the tools and resources that we have developed. We have developed recently how to develop the LTS. I know we've realized that there's not really a one-stop shop guidance on how to do so. So please use them and also reach out to us if you have any questions. All these resources are available at the UNDP Climate Promise website. You can also find me there. So with that, I'm going to stop my presentations and give the floor back to Roy. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sanju. That's great to see all of the work that's been done by the UNDP. We have a few short minutes for some quick questions. So the one question relates closely to some of the lessons learned from Sanji for Chioma. From Iris, there's a question on the Q&A saying, next to aligning the NDCs and LTS, have there been measures to ensure alignment with other sectoral strategies, such as the Nigeria National Energy Master Plan?
Can I take that?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so basically before we submitted the long-term emission development strategies for Nigeria, we got a support from UNDP, where the Ricardo Energy and Environment assisted Nigeria with to align the very most important document, which is Nigeria Energy Transition Plan, and also the NDC 2.0 and the long-term emission development strategy. So we've been trying to use that document as the yardstick for aligning every other important document, not only on the emission reduction activities, but also in other relevant MDAs that is speaking to the sectors of the NDC of Nigeria and also the long-term emission development sectors. And what Nigeria has done is to make sure that the sectors are mirrored. So what we did was to scale up activities in the long-term actions, why the NDC is a short-term way of achieving the long-term goals. So it is aligned in terms of the strategies, but again, we also make sure that your LTS are more ambitious than your short-term initiatives. Over.
Thank you so much, Chioma. I think we have run out of time, so I'm not going to open the floor to questions, unfortunately. I know our two speakers have other engagements that they urgently need to get to. So yeah, I think we can wrap off there. I just want to thank all of the speakers today for their excellent input.
Excuse me,
Yes.
please don't be angry. There's somebody that asked the question in the chat box. He mentioned about whether we did the technology assessment within the long-term low emission development strategy. No, we mentioned the needs of identifying the suitable technologies in the document, but the tailored assessment that will be addressing the gaps and the needs and the future needs of all the technology we have identified as a strategy on how to meet our goals has not been decided. So we're working with Federal Ministry of Science and Technology to make sure that we identify that and also put it out there as a guiding tool for implementation of both activities. Thank you.
Thank you. And then maybe, Chioma, one quick last question. that's come in. To what extent has climate resilience been considered for the LTLEs?
What extent is what?
Climate resilience.
Well, yes, very important, because Nigeria is prone to the adverse impacts of climate change. What we did is that we made sure that it's well integrated, not only in the LTLEs, but also we're going to pay much attention to it in the NDC 3.0 going forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. I think this has been a great session. Unfortunately, it is a bit shorter than we had hoped, but this is always the case with these great webinars. Please keep an eye on the GCAP platforms for the future webinars on this series. We hope that we'll be able to see a lot of you in Brazil later this year, where we can have these in-person engagements. But for now, I want to close off and thank everyone for the great inputs and for joining today. So thank you all. Have a great day further.